Welcome to the Pet Loss Journals podcast. I am your host Louise. This podcast is all about the reality and impact pet loss has on our lives, and I will be discussing my personal journey through pet loss. So if you are struggling on your own pet loss journey, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to episode 13. I'm so grateful that you're here listening to this episode today, and I am grateful if you had the chance to go back to listen to previous episodes. If you're wondering what this is all about, I would urge you to go back and listen to episode 1, where I describe in detail why I started this podcast. For this week, I'd love to share a journal entry from the 10th of May 2020. So I'll get reading. I am really struggling. I am writing because I want to figure out why. I know I am still grieving the dogs, but all of these other feelings are taking over a bit now. I find myself looking in my calendar on my phone quite a lot in a day, but that's something I always did. But my calendar is wiped empty now. No big cycles, no weddings, no trips away with friends, no weekends visiting family. The only one thing I have in my calendar is a week off in October for the dog's 1-year anniversaries, where I want to go up to County Fermanagh again and climb the Stairway to Heaven mountain. My coping strategy to the breakup with my ex was planning things and filling my calendar so that I would always have something to look forward to and not be in my house. And now all of that has gone. The complete opposite. My coping strategy has been taken away from me, and I feel low, really fucking low. This lockdown has fucked with everything, and I know things could be a lot worse. That was my journal entry from the 10th of May 2020. Obviously, I could feel the anger in this journal entry as I read it back. You may have noticed that with the language that I used. I will not sugarcoat or I will not replace bad words, because reading these journal entries are as they were written, and I will not amend them or change them. And also, I don't want to apologise to anyone listening for the language within it, because it was my authentic self. But this was transporting me back to this time. This was a time where I felt extremely restricted, isolated. I just mentioned that my calendar was completely wiped empty, and generally I would have my calendar full of things to look forward to, events, places to go, hikes, trips away, adventures, basically, in inverted commas, lots of adventures. And during the lockdown and the lockdowns, it was extremely difficult. Well, we weren't allowed to do anything, we weren't allowed to leave the house. This was just an added stress. And it was also an added layer onto my grief. Some of you listening may have gone through pet loss during the pandemic, during the lockdowns. And I have compassion for you. I am here with you in that, because it was horrific. It was so horrific. It was just something that none of us had ever gone through before. We didn't know how to deal with it, how to process it. Being told we couldn't see family and friends, being told that we couldn't leave our house. And for anybody that went through that completely alone, living alone, it was devastating. And it definitely was for me. I felt that. I mentioned that the only week off in my calendar was in October, for the dog's 1 year anniversary, where I wanted to go up and climb again a mountain in Fermanagh in Ireland. And I did this a few months, 2 months after they passed away. And this is something that I continue to do now, still. I do it every single year in memory of Ozzy and Moose. I mentioned that my coping strategy through the breakup with my ex, which you all know happened 4 weeks before my dogs died, was planning things to fill up my calendar, so that I'd always have something to look forward to. And maybe it could have led to distracting myself from pain. I will admit that. But having things to look forward to is something positive. It's not all black and white, because sometimes when we're grieving and we keep going and we're keeping busy all of the time and have things planned all of the time, that's slightly different, because we are avoiding our emotions and avoiding the pain. If we have enough time where we spend time alone, have self-care for ourselves, that's amazing and that's what's good. But if we never stop moving and we're going, that's when it can become harmful for us with regards trying to process grief or trying to keep our mental health healthy as such. I think that the anger really is what sticks out for me here in this journal entry, and coping strategies such as meeting with friends, chatting with family, getting in the car, going to nature, going to the ocean, all of those things that I would have done to help regulate my emotions. Those had to stop, and it was taken away from me. And I said in the journal entry, I feel really fucking low. And that, I guess that was an obvious result of being locked down in my home. But then saying, I know things could be a lot worse. So I think that that's such a common saying, and I don't know if you would agree, that saying things could be a lot worse is almost like we're giving out to ourselves for feeling so fucking low. We're giving out to ourselves, saying things could be a lot worse. But also I think it's a societal thing. I've definitely heard this down through the years. I mean, families and parents and things will say that to their kids, that, oh, stop crying, it could be a lot worse, and stop being upset, it could be a lot worse. Of so many different situations that would apply to. But it's not something that, now reading it, it's not something that I say to myself. It's not something that I say in my inner world to myself anymore, because my feelings are extremely valid in that moment that I was writing that journal entry. Your feelings are extremely valid on whatever journal entries you're writing down, or whatever events or emotions that you're going through. We should not dismiss them by saying a comment that, I know things could be a lot worse. Look, maybe it's an intellectual fact that things could be a lot worse. But what good is it to actually say that to ourselves in the moment? I don't believe that it's helpful. I think it's being really harsh on ourselves, and it's telling ourselves to erase our emotions within that moment that we're saying it. And that's really, really not helpful at all. I don't know if anybody listening has been through a breakup during the pandemic, during the lockdowns, but going through that grief is extremely painful as well. I just wanted to highlight that because I know I mentioned it in the journal entry, that we had certain ways of coping. And then if we have multiple losses happen to us during the lockdown, it can nearly diminish the original loss depending on the intensity of the new loss that has happened. And that is really important to kind of understand, because our brains nearly go offline. They can't cope with so much pain at once. That is what happened to me. I'm speaking for myself here. That my brain it couldn't cope with the 3 losses that I was experiencing. And I had another major loss earlier on in that year that was still unresolved within me. And I feel like I went into this kind of self-protection state, and my brain just went offline to some of those losses and put them to the very back of my brain or my mind, whatever you'd like to describe it as. It was just too painful to try and process all of them at once, or to try and think about them all at once. So today's journal entry, yes, definitely transports me back to that time in the lockdown, which was so incredibly difficult. Trying to fill up our calendars. And at the minute, if you're going through this, if you're going through the death of your companion animal and you are trying to fill up your calendar with things to do, just remember to have some space, give yourself some time to have alone time with yourself, to grieve, to literally grieve, and I mean it in the most literal way, to cry. Be that you run yourself a hot bath and you let that emotion out and you cry. Be that you just need to stop. You have a really slow walk in nature. Don't make the aim of the walk, fitness, exercise. Let it be, because you want to be alone with nature and let that emotion out. Let the grief out of your body. Overfilling our calendars can just lead to distraction and lead to suppression of that pain. So being alone for me during that time, I do remember a lot of emotion was released, simply because I didn't have a choice to do all of the things that I would normally do to fill my day up, so that I couldn't feel the emotion. Of course, I was still walking a lot, but we weren't really allowed to leave our homes for unessential journeys. So I hope that you have gotten something or resonated with something within today's journal entry. And I know that I am fully aware that speaking about lockdowns and grieving during lockdowns can be upsetting for people, but please know that I am empathizing with you and have compassion for you if you had gone through this, because oh my God, it was probably the single most difficult thing I've ever had to deal with. Grief and a lockdown, grief and not reaching your support system. So it's just heartbreaking that people had to go through this. And I feel sad for myself that I was so angry. It's like I was so angry because I just wanted to get out, and I just wanted to speak to the people in my life and see the people in my life and hug them and get that comfort that I needed and that support, and I just wasn't allowed. So that's really restricting and really heartbreaking. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this week's episode. Remember, your pet loss grief is real and it is so valid. Please be gentle on yourself. Until next time, take care.